Gentlemen, good to have you back. Today we're going to be looking inward at our fears. Now, I don't know about you, but I have fears, and I would assume you do as well. For example, one longtime fear I have is a fear of spiders. I just don't like them. For some reason, I find them creepy. In fact, thinking about them right now is bothering me. This is a common held phobia we call arachnophobia. And a few of my closest friends, and now you, who know I'm afraid of spiders, often leverage this for their own personal amusement. But on a more serious note, some of us have fears that are powerful and even debilitating in our life. For example, a couple of years ago, my daughter and I were involved in a serious car accident. For us, driving after the accident generated a lot of fear. And if you've ever been in a serious car accident, you understand how paralyzing your fear can be in your life. From a spiritual perspective, though, unhealthy fear can be debilitating and impede our faith in God. Yet on the other hand, healthy fear can actually invigorate our faith. In today's lesson, we're going to discover how fear and faith work together and against each other by understanding the difference between holy fear and circumstantial fear, with an outcome of identifying where you might need to fear God in contrast with fearing your circumstances. For the first break, there are three tasks. First, I want to invite someone to pray for the group time today. You might consider taking some prayer requests this week. Second, dive into the small group questions in the gray box in pairs, as usual. And then third, I want you to specifically discuss the last question as a group. So after you've discussed all the questions in pairs, try to come up with a comprehensive answer to this last question together. Take about 15 to 20 minutes for these three activities, and I'll see you right back here when you're done. I hope you came up with a good definition of fear, because we're going to put it to a test and see if it matches up with a good biblical definition. Today, we're going to be looking at a well-known story in the Bible. It's the account of Jesus walking on the water. So let me read it for you. We're reading the account found in Matthew chapter 14. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and he began to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." For the next break, here's a couple of things. First, reread the text on your own, making as many observations from the text as possible. Refer to Lesson 1 on inductive Bible study if you need. Remember, you are looking for words, characters, grammar, sentences, genre, and mood. Please feel free to underline, circle, and make notes on your page, and your on-site host should give you about 5 to 8 minutes with this text. Second, of course, discuss it as a group. Take at least 15 minutes for this discussion. Remember to focus on observations, and then your interpretations and applications will come. At this time, you can pause the video, and when you're done, I'll see you right back here. I love this text because it's one of those stories in the Bible that never gets old. And regardless of your age, the story has rich application for any phase in life. I'm also curious if, after reading the text, you might alter your definition of fear at all. For example, maybe you saw another dimension of fear, a spiritual dimension that results in worship of God. Anyhow, here are my observations. First, I think context is critical here. For those of you who took the time to read the text just prior, well, good for you. You learn that Jesus has just finished feeding the 5,000. He then turns to the disciples, commands them to get into the boat and to meet up with him on the other side of the lake, after which Jesus dismisses the crowd and goes alone up to the mountains to pray. Second, setting is important. If you want to imagine here, you might see a scenic lake surrounded by large rolling hills. On the scene, you have men who are experienced sailors who have been on this lake perhaps hundreds of times during their life. They know the intended direction, they know the lake, and they even know the vessel that they'll be sailing in. Their issue is that they're not making progress because they're beaten by the elements, the waves and the wind. In the Gospel of John, we read similar renditions of this story and learn that they were about 3 miles from the shore. So the plot thickens as we discover they row all night long without any real progress toward their goal. They enter the boat at around sunset, and we find them still in the middle of the lake the next morning between 3 and 6 a.m. This would seem to infer exhaustion, frustration, perhaps a lack of coherence for men who are rowing all through the night. That's about 12 hours of rowing, by the way. And I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I can do anything for 12 hours straight, physically like that. And Jesus intentionally waits. It's not accidental. If you turn to the Gospel of Mark, you learn in this account that Jesus could see them as he was praying from the mountainside. Third observation. There are 2 central characters. First, of course, is Jesus, and he makes these strong, authoritative statements, like he made the disciples get in the boat. He dismisses the crowd. He says, "Take heart, it is I." Strong statements like, "Come, and you of little faith." The second character in the story is Peter, and he does all these unusual things. First, he is the only person on the boat to speak with what appears to be a premonition on the water. That's very unusual. The second unusual thing that he does is he requests to go out and endanger his life in the storm. He says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And the third unusual thing is that Jesus speaks only one word, "come," and for some reason, this was enough to motivate Peter to get out of the boat. Now, gentlemen, I would never do that, ever. The next text says Peter then saw the wind, which you and I know we cannot see the wind, only the effects of the wind. And suddenly, something changed in Peter's mind. His fear of the elements and circumstances all of a sudden take priority over the supernatural event happening below his feet. And then finally, all the characters come together. Jesus grabs Peter, brings him back to the boat, at which point the storm ceases, and Jesus makes the simple, concise statement to close off this incredible teachable moment. "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And then there's this worship, and they experience a moment embossed onto their mind forever, an unforgettable moment where they instantly bow to a greater fear, the fear of a holy, sovereign God who is on the boat with them. Jesus is the object of their faith and not the circumstances of life in that moment. So here's my application. The object of your fear determines your faith. The object of your fear determines your faith. You know, there are many times in my life I've witnessed supernatural intervention, and yet how quickly I forget God's faithfulness to me. There are moments that can even be spectacular and unexplainable, and yet I seem to forget that God is always going to be faithful to me. At the beginning of our time today, I alluded to a car accident that I had with my daughter. Traveling at about 75 miles an hour down the freeway on midnight of Christmas Eve, my daughter and I hit ice, slid out of control, T-boned a guardrail, flipped 3 times down a deserted embankment, not viewable to passersby, and we survived with some sore muscles, pinched nerves, herniated discs, small abrasion on my daughter's leg, and nothing else. We walked away from the vehicle. However, everything was ejected from the truck. Even the shoes from our feet were thrown from the truck. The only things that remained were my daughter and I, who were buckled in. And often I think about this accident and am humbled that God spared both me and my daughter, because I can't imagine any other outcome. But why do we so quickly forget these impressionable, memorable, miraculous moments? This is exactly what happens in this text. In the text, the disciples just witnessed one of the great miracles in history. Jesus fed 5,000 plus people, and yet this miraculous moment was somehow quickly forgotten less than 12 hours later. The faith they had on the mountainside was somehow unfused hours later on the water just 3 miles from shore. And notice, this did not just happen, but that Jesus manufactured this moment. This is a critical note. Jesus is allowing circumstances to test their faith to ensure that they learn a life lesson forever. He wants them to know that only God is the object of their faith, nothing else. In any circumstance, from any angle, he is pushing their faith to the extreme in this private, teachable moment. And men, we are so quick to forget, aren't we? When we turn from supernatural faith with God, where he is the object, toward human effort, where we're the object, we demonstrate that we have forgotten. When we lean on our understanding, ability, and our skill, we're choosing to embrace trust in the object of ourself over faith in God. We turn from God as the object towards ourself as the object, and what is birthed, well, is a showcase of our human fear. And as a result, we're often limited by our own human ability. Just like these men. They know the boat, they know the direction, the lake even, but they need a better answer because it's not working. It is beyond these limits that God wants to take us. He wants to move us toward deeper levels of comprehension of who he is. Therefore, every moment in my day when God tests my faith and circumstantial fear begins to build in me, this is a trigger for me to turn to him. I can accept that storm as a lesson from God about who I am currently and who God wants me to be. We all have circumstantial fear about our future, about our career, about our health, about our finances, about our purpose, about being found out in our sin. Our goal is to turn away from these circumstantial fears towards God as the object, fearing him alone, and allowing this to carry us into new and exciting experiences in our journey. At this time, I'm going to hand you back to your on-site host. Take a moment to discuss the small group questions in pairs at the bottom of the page. Spend a minute or two considering your action items together this week. And you will also know that there is some skill development and additional reading at the bottom of your page. These are there for you to take the application even further. And with that, gentlemen, I'll see you right back here next week. Until then, be, live, and act resolute.